In country music, the stage has always been a place of joy. But behind the lights, there are stories filled with shadows. Among the darkest is the life and death of David "Stringbean" Akeman, a man who could make entire crowds laugh with his banjo and slapstick charm, yet whose final night remains one of the most haunting tragedies in Nashville's history. His murder, and the mystery that followed, has lingered for decades, shaping the way country musicians live, and how fans remember one of their most beloved entertainers. To understand why his death struck so deep, we must begin with the life he lived before that November night in 1973. David Akeman was born in 1915 in the small town of Annville, Kentucky. His family, like many in the Appalachian foothills, lived a life of hard work and very little comfort. The Great Depression would later leave scars on his generation. But even before then, survival meant working long hours in the fields. Out of that rugged environment, young David found something that gave him joy: music. He taught himself the banjo, and from the moment he wrapped his fingers around the strings, he displayed a natural gift. Music became his escape from the weight of poverty, a voice that carried him beyond the farm rows and hillsides of Kentucky. Because of his tall and skinny frame, people began to call him Stringbean, and the nickname stuck for life. Instead of resisting it, he embraced it. On stage, he wore clothes deliberately too big for him: floppy shirts, long pants, and suspenders that exaggerated his lanky figure. It became part of his act, blending comedy with world-class banjo picking. Audiences laughed at his jokes, but they never dismissed his musicianship. Beneath the humor was one of the finest banjo players of his generation. In the 1940s, his skill carried him into the company of legends. He joined Bill Monroe and his Bluegrass Boys, standing beside the father of bluegrass himself. Stringbean played a key role during the early days of the genre, helping define the very sound that would later sweep across America. While Monroe chased the spotlight and fame, Stringbean never seemed interested in those trappings. His passion was the music and the connection it created with ordinary people. By the 1950s, he found his true home at the Grand Ole Opry. Every Saturday night, he walked onto that stage with his oversized clothes and banjo, cracking jokes before breaking into lively tunes. His act was simple but effective, part slapstick comedy, part musical showcase. He represented something audiences cherished: authenticity. He wasn't polished like many of his peers, and that made him feel even more real. Fans loved him because he embodied the spirit of the mountains, a man who never forgot his roots. Off the stage, Stringbean lived just as simply as he performed. He married Estelle, the love of his life, and the two of them settled in a log cabin in Ridgetop, Tennessee. Their life together was quiet and grounded. They tended gardens, fished in nearby streams, and enjoyed evenings with friends. Those who knew them described them as kind, welcoming, and unpretentious. While other Opry stars bought mansions and luxury cars, the Akemans lived humbly, never flaunting wealth or fame. But there was one quirk about Stringbean that stood out, and it would prove to be deadly. Having lived through the Great Depression, he never trusted banks. He had seen financial institutions collapse and wipe out people's savings, and that experience stayed with him for the rest of his life. To him, money was safer in cash, held in hand or tucked away at home. He carried cash often and was known to pay for things in bills rather than checks. Over time, it became clear to friends and fellow musicians that he also hid money in his cabin. Some whispered about stashes of thousands, maybe tens of thousands, hidden in boots, coats, or furniture. The rumors grew with every retelling, until eventually they became a kind of folklore surrounding him. In Nashville, those rumors spread far beyond the Opry stage. Some thought it was an amusing eccentricity, but for desperate men, the story took on another meaning. To them, Stringbean's home wasn't just a modest cabin. It was a vault waiting to be cracked open. On the night of November 10th, 1973, Stringbean followed his usual routine. He performed at the Grand Ole Opry, delighting audiences once again with his blend of humor and banjo tunes. To the fans, it was just another Saturday night with one of their favorites. After the show, he and Estelle drove home to Ridgetop, unaware of the danger waiting for them. While they were at the Opry, cousins John and Marvin Brown had broken into the Akeman cabin. Motivated by the rumors of hidden cash, they tore the house apart. Drawers were emptied, closets ransacked, furniture overturned. But their frantic search turned up little, and frustration mounted as the hours dragged on. By the time the Akemans returned home, the Browns were desperate and armed. Stringbean entered first. The house was clearly disturbed, and before he could react, a gunshot ended his life instantly. Estelle screamed and tried to flee, but one of the cousins chased her outside and shot her in cold blood. In the space of moments, the home that had once been filled with laughter and music became a scene of horror and silence. The Browns fled with almost nothing to show for their crime. The next morning, Stringbean's close friend and fellow Opry star Grandpa Jones arrived at the cabin, expecting to join his friend for a hunting trip. Instead, he discovered the bodies. The sight would haunt him for the rest of his life. Word spread quickly through Nashville, and the headlines left the music community stunned. One of their most beloved performers and his wife had been murdered in their own home. Police wasted no time investigating. The ransacked home made the motive clear: robbery. Suspicion soon landed on John and Marvin Brown, both of whom had criminal histories and were known in the area. Evidence quickly piled up, including stolen belongings that tied them to the crime. Arrests followed, and during the trial, prosecutors laid out the chilling details. The Browns had broken in, searched the house for hours, and murdered the Akemans when they returned home. The jury convicted them of first-degree murder, sentencing both to life in prison. For many, it felt like justice had been served, but the truth revealed in the years that followed only deepened the sorrow. One of the cousins eventually admitted what investigators had long suspected. They had been driven entirely by the rumors of hidden cash. They believed a fortune was in that cabin, but what they found was only scraps. Their frustration and fear turned the robbery into a double murder. The most haunting revelation came afterward, when friends and family combed through the Akemans' belongings. They found money, thousands of dollars, stuffed into old coats, rolled into boots, and tucked into furniture. Much of it had rotted over the years, destroyed by time and moisture. The Browns had overlooked almost everything. They had murdered two innocent people for almost nothing, while the fortune they sought was right in front of them, quietly decaying into worthless paper. The tragedy cut deeply into the Opry community. Friends like Grandpa Jones never recovered from what they saw that morning. Performers who once lived with open doors and easy trust began locking their homes, buying guard dogs, and carrying firearms. Fear replaced the innocence that had once defined Nashville's music scene. Fans, too, were shaken. The news reached across the country, reminding everyone that even beloved entertainers were not safe from violence fueled by greed. As the years passed, the story only grew heavier. The killers wasted their lives behind bars. The money they longed for crumbled away in forgotten pockets. And the Akemans, two people who had lived simply and given joy to millions, were gone forever. It was a crime that accomplished nothing, leaving behind only grief and wasted lives. The murders of David Stringbean Akeman and his wife Estelle remain one of the darkest moments in country music history. What makes the story so painful is its futility. They died because of rumors. Their killers destroyed their own futures for scraps. And the fortune at the heart of it all never benefited anyone, left to rot in silence. Today, Stringbean is remembered not for his death, but for his laughter, his banjo, and his place in the Opry family. Yet the shadow of that night lingers. It is a reminder of how greed and rumor can twist into violence, how even a life built on simplicity can attract envy, and how tragedy can strike when least expected. His legacy is music and joy, but his story also stands as a warning, one that Nashville has never forgotten.